קדמה מונח זרקה מונח סגול קדמה מונח זרקה מונח סגול מונח רביעי מפר פשטה זקף קטון זקף גדול מאחת טיפך מונח את נחתה פזר תלישה קטנה תלישה גדולה קדמה אז לה גרש גרשיים דרגה תביר מרחק תביר יתיב מונח מרחק טיפחה מרחק סוף פסוק. Previously, we learned how to sing the ta'amim and identify them in a text. Don't worry if you don't know the ta'amim song yet off by heart, but do keep learning. It can take some time to sink in, but once it does, you'll have the most powerful tool to becoming a real professional ba'alat riyah. Wouldn't it be great if you could open the Chumash randomly and chant the reading? By the end of this class, you'll have learned some skills to prepare any reading you want. Sure, you can get a hold of a recording and learn it off by heart, but this class will teach you to prepare a reading in a logical and independent way. In this lesson, I'll introduce the essential skill of dividing the pasuk according to the level of the cantillation mark. And I'll also share a few tips and tricks for effectively learning and memorizing the reading. But think of this class just as a springboard. There's a lot more to learn, and I'll recommend some more resources on the homework page. When I learn a reading, I first do a quick survey of the text, and only then do I start to really study it. I find myself first doing a quick overview, then I get down to sounding out the text, and only when I'm very sure of the meaning of every word and its pronunciation, then I'll begin to memorize. This is a scan from my Tikkun Korim. Here's a photo of my well-worn Tikkun Korim. Hopefully, you can pick one up at a Judaica store, or maybe your synagogue has one that is looking for a new home. Just make sure it's Simanim. That's the edition that has helpful aids, like the bolded Shvana or the long Kamatz Katan, and all sorts of other nice stuff. So I highly recommend using a Tikkun Korim to prepare a reading. For example, I like that it shows Shvana bolded, like under the resh here in Yishretzu. If you know Hebrew grammar really well, you wouldn't need this crutch. But for the rest of us, it's very helpful to have Shvana bolded. You could see here like in Hagedolim, Peru. So that's really nice. And there are other places where when it's not bolded, like for example, under the shin here, Yish Retzu, you know that it's not bolded, so you pronounce it as a Shvanach. Another good thing about the Tikkun is that on the left side, you have the text pretty much as it appears in the Sefer Torah. And when I'm learning, I only glance briefly at the right side. Only if I'm stuck, I try as soon as possible to learn from the left side. And that way, when I get to the Sefer Torah, I see the Nikud and I see the cantillation marks in my mind's eye, almost as if, it was printed there. So the first thing is to survey your text. You should know what the text is about. Use a translation if you need to. In fact, if you really understand the text, and with practice, you will be able to predict where the disjunctive cantillation marks are, because you'll understand how the pasuk is divided. So when you're doing your survey of the text, think also about your audience, who you're reading for. The text that we're going to be using is from Bereshit, Perek Aleph. It's 5 psukim from 20 to 24. And I chose it because it has some interesting marks and stuff. I just want to show to you the PK and so on. After you have an idea what you're reading, now you get down to really reading the text. When I'm learning, I find myself working in an iterative way, in a cycle, where I'll sound out the words, making sure to pronounce everything correctly. Then I add in the melody, and then looking at the left side of the tikkun, I make sure I know how to chant it without the punctuation or the cantillation marks in front of me. This cycle is applied like a spiral on every part of every pasuk, and then on every pasuk, and then on a few psukim, and so on. At the first step, when you learn the pronunciation, use the ta'amim to know where to divide the pasuk. Use the ta'amim to know where to put the accent, which syllable to stress, and pay attention to shvana and shvanach, and which letters have a dagesh, a dot in them, like a bet versus a vet, or regular hey and mepik hey. And once you have that down, apply the melody. But you don't have to totally finish one step before the other. Applying the melody actually helps you to stress the correct syllable. So really, don't think of these as steps, but more like a continuous improvement cycle. Let's start learning this reading together, and on the way I'll show you a bunch of tricks you can use going forward. Talking about going forward, I actually learned the text going backwards. I started the last pasuk in the aliyah and learned that before going to the second to last pasuk. So I would learn this first and then this one. Then I review these last two psukim looking only at the left side. And then I learned the third to last pasuk, and so on. This technique is called back chaining. It's used in other contexts, such as dog training, sports, or memorizing speeches. By learning backwards, you actually chain the behavior forwards, so you end up connecting the end of a pasuk to the beginning of the next one. What happens is that even under pressure, you gain confidence and you won't blank out. Even if you're not reading at the kotel and you don't have demonstrators screaming at you or police threatening to arrest you for reading Torah, chanting for a congregation can be stressful. And by back chaining while you learn, you'll get a smooth and fluent reading. Okay, so a few things to notice in this pasuk. The mepik hey, the dot instead of the hey, that means it's the possessive, it's kind, and you pronounce it leminah. And here too, leminah, nah, nah. So it means it's kind, and if you don't say it correctly, you change the meaning of the word. Another thing to notice are the shvana, behema, vechaito, eretz, lemina. And here is where you don't have, this one is just a shvanach, so it's vayhi and vechaito. Another thing you should pay attention to is when you have a sin or a shin. This is remes. And here, this chaf, it's ch, right? It's vayhi chen. After you get the pronunciation down, vowels and such, the next thing is to look at the division of the pasuk. Almost every pasuk has an etnachta, and that splits the pasuk into two level 1 clauses. Then you have level 2 clauses, which I colored in purple. These will nest under level 1. If the level 2 has more than 3 words, it will also subdivide. We have 4 levels of subdivision here. All the colored cantillation marks are disjunctive symbols, where you have a larger or smaller pause. The marks in black are conjunctive. They lead into the disjunctive word. For example, mechatipcha, or kadma vazla. Kadma is conjunctive and vazla is disjunctive, and you have a tiny pause afterwards. Here's an example of dividing up a pasuk. Vayichen is level 1. It's right after the Etnachta. And V'chaito Eretz is level 2 because of the Tipcha. Tvir, level 3. Pashta, level 3. Kadma Vazla, level 4. Let me show you how I would prepare this pasuk. ויברך אותם אלוהים לאמור, פרו ורבו ומילאו את המים בימים, והעוף ירב בארץ. Etnachta is over here. This is the second part. I like to always look at the end. ירב בארץ, והעוף. ומילאו את המים בימים. So, this is interesting. You have a pashta on maim, but it's doubled here. The tikkun puts it a second time on top of the mem to show you that you have to accent the middle mem of maim, even though it's the melody of pashta. Hamaim bayamim. Okay, now here, this is also a tevil. It's important to note that after the tevil, it's only a small pause compared to the tipcha. So here you would say, ויברך אותם אלוהים לאמור. The main stop, well, the main stop is etnachta, but the second main stop is after the tipcha. Another thing to notice is the shva here. It's vai varech. It's not vaye varech. No, it's vai varech. ויברך אותם אלוהים לאמור, פרו ורבו ומילאו את המים בימים, והעוף ירב בארץ. And at this point, you should be looking at the left side and try to sing it here. ויברך אותם אלוהים לאמור. There's some interesting things I'd like to show you in this pasuk. We have here munach, the et, and we have another munach under the nun. It goes together with this word, kol nefesh, because of this dash. So we have kol nefesh, and then we have here hachaya, and it's not a munach. This is empty. So it's just pronounced hachaya, and this kamatz is a kamatz katan. You can see that it has an extended vertical line, so it's pronounced kol and not kal. So if I read it all together, we have ויברא אלוהים את התנינים הגדולים ואת כל נפש החיה הרומסת אשר שרצו המים למיניהם, ואת כל עוף כנף למיניהו, וירא אלוהים כי טוב. One thing that helps me to stay calm when I'm reading is to remember that reading Torah is not a show, it's a service to my community. So if you're really enthusiastic about learning to read Torah and you want to go all pro, this is an excellent book. And your homework is to practice the Ta'amim song. It will take some time for it to sink in. It's very important to buy a Tikkun Korim. That is absolutely necessary if you're going to be a Torah reader. Online resources for Cantillation, Machon Mamre has all sorts of texts with and without cantillation marks. Now go ahead, take a text, try to choose something with a mipike in it, and please try to use the backchain method. At first, it might feel unnatural, it might be a bit difficult, but it's worth it. Use it and you'll see it will really help you a lot. you can set up a Zoom with me so I can give you some feedback. And if you need me to make a recording of a certain reading, I can do that too. So keep in touch. And here's a little bonus. וידבר אדוני אל משה לאמור, צב בבני ישראל, ואמרת עליהם את קורבני לחמי לישי, ריח ניחוחי תשמרו להקריב לי במועדו, ואמרת להם, זה האיש אשר תקריבו לאדוני, כבשים בני שנה תמימים, שניים ליום או לתמיד. ואמרת להם, זה האיש אשר תקריבו לאדוני, כבשים בני שנה תמימים, שניים ליום או לתמיד. את הכבש אחד תעשה בבוקר, ואת הכבש השני תעשה בין 40. בעשירית האיפה סולת למנחה בלולה, ושמן כתית רביעית ההין. עולת תמיד עשויה בהר סיני, לריח ניחוח אישה לאדוני, ונזכור רביעית ההין לכבש האחד בקודש, הסך נסך שחר לאדוני. ואת הכבש השני תעשה בין 40, כמנחת הבוקר, וכנזכו תעשה אישה ריח ניחוח לאדוני. וביום השבת 2 כבשים בני שנה תמימים, ו2 עשרונים, סולת מנחה בלולב השמן, ונזכור עולת שבת בשבתו על עולת התמיד ונזכח. ובראשי חודשיכם תקריבו עולה לאדוני, פרים בני בקר 2 ואיל 1, כבשים בני שנה 7 תמימים, ו3 עשרונים, סולת מנחה בלולב השמן לפר האחד, ו2 עשרונים, סולת מנחה בלולב השמן לאיל האחד, ויסרון יסרון, סולת מנחה בלולב השמן לכבש האחד, עולה ריח ניחוח אישה לאדוני, ונזקיהם חצי ההין יהיה לפר, ושלישית ההין לאיל, ורביעית ההין לכבש יין. זאת עולת חודש בחודשו לחודשי השנה, וסיר עזים אחד לחטאת לאדוני, על עולת התמיד יעשה ונזכור.